Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm doing an interview with Siim Land today, the author of Metabolic Autophagy and intermittent fasting and lots of other ebooks and books. And the Metabolic Autophagy book I've been working on, it is huge and filled with information, so you must read it. It's a resource for fasting, keto, endurance athletes, hardcore HIIT training athletes, Spartan racing, CrossFit, whatever type of athlete you are, you'll get great information out of those books. So it's been out a couple of years, but I just finally been trying to read it and really wanted Siim to come on the show to talk more about metabolic flexibility, how much carbs is too much or too little for athletes and endurance athletes, and more. So we've got lots of information to dive into. I kind of have too many questions, so it might be a longer episode today. But he's the author, speaker, and content creator and a biohacking coach. Siim Land talks about optimizing health, longevity, and performance, which is right in line with my focus on this show is the same thing, and creates different strategies that include nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress, circadian rhythms, fasting, technology, and supplements. So a lot of stuff that I've learned from Ben Greenfield's program way back in 2011. I did a superhuman coach program, and 2 years ago, that was last year, we did the Keon coaching program that he started. And I think a lot of stuff that we've been talking about in the show since 2011, almost 10 years, that we're really diving into how to improve your performance and longevity. I think the key word, and Ben Greenfield's about this too, and Siim Land, and the whole thing about fasting is about the aging process, how you can improve the aging process. And as I talked to MitoQ company out of New Zealand the other day, it's like, who doesn't want to improve the aging process? I want to age gracefully, still be able to exercise and move upstairs and downstairs without pain. I want to be able to travel the world and still do maybe some races, shorter distance, and just enjoy life. Instead of, I saw someone at the gym this morning walking sideways and just so damaged from years of running. So it's not necessarily that running is horrible for you, but how you run is essential to your longevity, so you don't wear your joints out. But so how we train is really important, how we fuel, and how we recover and repair. So many people overtrain and under-recover. And I think a lot of what Siim's put in his book and kind of goes with the whole fasting, intermittent fasting, and keto endurance training, and all the stuff we've been talking about really is the wave of the future. And I think finally people are jumping on the bandwagon and taking time to consider thinking outside the box from the high carb to the lower carb and how to improve your metabolic efficiency and flexibility. So let's bring on Siim, and I've got 16 questions, and I actually had more than that. So we'll see what we can go into. If you get his book on his website, you can get his free offer on siimland.co/autophagy-cheat-sheet. So obviously I'll put that in the show notes, but he will help us understand more about all the research he's done at such a young age and how we can improve the performance gains and the longevity process for athletes of all levels in all sports. So let's get him on the show and just get into all these questions we all have. Thanks. Hey guys, I have Siim Land on the line today, and I'm excited to go into all these questions we have for you. So thank you for coming on the show. And I know it's Friday night where you live, and you're podcasting with me. It's a date night.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on the show, and I'm glad to do it finally.
Well, we've been trying to get you on here in our busy schedules and time changes, but I think this is a huge topic for our listeners as everyone is kind of hopefully going into their off season and recovering from a busy endurance triathlon season. And what people need to know is kind of all this information you have in your huge Bible book, Metabolic Autophagy, and all these other books you've written. And can I ask how old you are? Young you are? Old you are?
Yeah, I'm 25 at the moment.
25. So I just was talking to Robert Sykes of Keto Savage. He's 28. You guys are all these motivated, driven people. It's so amazing. So talk about your story. How did you get down this road to create this book, Metabolic Autophagy, with all this research, and it's huge, and all these other ebooks you've done. So kind of talk a little bit about your why.
Well, yeah, like usually people in this space tend to come from the background of having some sort of a disease or a medical condition, or they were overweight or they had some health problems. But for me, that wasn't the case. So to say, I've just been very interested in improving myself both physically and mentally since high school. So to say, I did start off with just general fitness and weightlifting, that sort of thing, to get in shape. But I've kind of realized quite soon that the best medicine is prevention, and you can't really take your health for granted, and you shouldn't. So I just wanted to preemptively make sure that my health is optimal all throughout my entire lifetime, and that's where I delve deeper into not only like just body composition and fitness, but also just nutrition, anti-aging. How do you improve your mindset? How do you like manage stress and everything related to just being like an optimal human being? And I started writing my blog after military, and that was my first or my second year in college. Second year in college. And since that time, I've just moved on to YouTube. Started my podcast and written like several books about primarily nutrition when it comes to like ketogenic dieting and intermittent fasting. But they include a lot more information about sleep and everything related to like biohacking.
Mm-hmm. That's similar to my background. Is a personal trainer for many years, and I, long time ago, 10 years ago or more, figured out, there's so much more to being healthy than just exercising. And I've done, triathlons, endurance world marathons, and cycling, and I learned long time ago that it's more to that. So I put together the holistic method that's working on nutrition and exercise, but the same thing: sleep, stress, movement, mobility work, and digestion, gut health, hormone balance, and hydration and happiness, gratitude and play. I think so many people forget about that part, that you got to have fun in life and then laugh and be silly and not be so uptight. So I get where you're going with that. It's a good plan.
It's about practicing some sort of foresight, in the sense that you're being smarter. You don't have to like fail yourself. It's more about learning from the mistakes of others, and just saving a lot of time and effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's my goal, to teach people, as you said in your bio too, is to burn fat, optimize mitochondria function, improve performance, and in the aging process. And I think that's so essential for athletes, especially endurance athletes, when we're asking our body to do a lot. And it's a lot more of that chronic cardio that we get in trouble for, because they're training more than 45 minutes a time, and how it's, more that Goldilocks effect, how much is too much and how much is too little. But how do you work on kind of biohacking in a way to prevent damage that we're doing to your body because you love to do an endurance event as a marathon or triathlon? And how do you overcome the damage with the proper healing treatment, fasting, and all the different biohacking we'll talk to you about? But I think a great way to start is, hopefully everyone gets your book. I'll put the links in the show notes, because it's something I've been working on reading a couple months, and I keep going back and reading sections over and over again. But what is cell autophagy and the benefit of fasting for performance and longevity?
Yeah, well, autophagy translates from Greek into self-eating, and it's this cellular process where your cells are being recycled, so to say that the old worn-out parts and organelles are being broken down and they're converted back into energy, so to say. So it's like housekeeping, and the benefits are a lot related to just cell maintenance, preventing the accumulation of waste material, and general anti-aging and longevity. So and it's autophagy itself, it can be thought of as like a longevity mechanism, but it also has a lot of other important roles in the body, such as even some of the physiological adaptations to exercise are mediated by autophagy, and autophagy even is involved in the process of burning fat and clearing out the brain from plaque and all sorts of things. So it's more than just like the garbage disposal process. It's a very like a central component to like generally healthy functioning of the body. And when it comes to specifically the mitochondria, then the process of autophagy is also involved in eliminating dysfunctional mitochondria and repairing them. So that's why it's like, very important for both physical performance as well as longevity and health.
So talk about the role of the mitochondria, because that's obviously essential energy production. We always learn in school that, they're the energy, the powerhouses of the cells. So how does fasting and becoming a fat burning athlete, individual, and working on reducing chronic fatigue, so we're working on performance longevity, how does the mitochondria play a role in all that?
Mitochondria are really central to energy production. And if you don't have like sufficient energy, then your body doesn't have like the resources to do its job properly. And that's therefore is going to experience like suboptimal levels of performance as well as suboptimal cellular functioning. So everything is going to just become worse as a result of that. And with strategies like fasting, exercise, and some form of carb restriction, they're like just efficient ways of enhancing mitochondrial density as well as triggering mitochondrial biogenesis, so to say. So building both the power plants or the amount of the power plants as well as making them work more efficiently, so to say, that increasing the capacity of the of one single mitochondrion to produce more energy. And especially in the example of burning fat, like fat is able to produce like significantly more ATP than glucose and carbs. And your body already carries thousands and thousands of calories with it in the form of body fat compared to the limited amount of glycogen that is stored in muscle and liver. So that's why there's a significant difference especially in the example of endurance exercise, where fat adaptation and making the body more used to burning its own body fat has like a significant performance boost just because of increasing the mitochondrial density. And even like fasting also like triggers mitochondrial biogenesis, so to say. So everything, because the problem is never that your body doesn't have enough energy. The problem tends to be that the body can't access that energy that efficiently, so to say. The body is kind of addicted to sugar and carbohydrates because in the modern world we've conditioned our bodies to be like that way. So if you were to be living in the wild, then you're forced to fast every once in a while, and you're forced to eat a very restrictive diet that is actually like a very Paleolithic type of diet, that you don't have like a bunch of extra calories, you don't have a bunch of extra carbs, and therefore your body has to learn how to burn some body fat more efficiently.
So how does fasting, or let's start with intermittent fasting, help with that? So you're saying the mitochondria of fasting get stronger, or does the cell autophagy help the mitochondria function as well as working on kind of a hormetic stressors to help strengthen the mitochondria that we do have?
Yeah, well, fasting is, you mentioned, it's a hormetic stressor that is essentially gives a positive response in small amounts, so to say, that it makes the body stronger afterwards because the body, detects the necessity to be more resilient. And fasting, when it comes to the mitochondria or the autophagy process, then fasting triggers mitochondrial autophagy or mitophagy, and this is the one that recycles old and worn out mitochondria. And if there's some form of mitochondrial dysfunction, or you're suffering from chronic inflammation and too much stress, then inevitably some of the mitochondria will begin to be worn out, and they're not going to be eliminated completely initially. So they're going to just start to spread more inflammation, and they're going to spread this damage to other mitochondria, and that's going to inhibit energy production. So with fasting, you can clear these dysfunctional mitochondria much more efficiently, and you're keeping the healthy ones more alive. And fasting also triggers the fusion of mitochondria, so to say. Usually, the mitochondria, they're constantly being cycled between fission and fusion states. So when they're fused together, then the mitochondria are more efficient in energy production, because they don't have to move around that much, so to say. So they're closer together, and they're more dense in this sense. So that's the aspect of hormesis. And fasting itself also activates the AMPK pathway, which is the kind of fat burning switch that promotes ketosis and fat adaptation. So you're making your body you're promoting the idea that the mitochondria will begin to run better on fat as calories, and they will also be able to sustain the energy production for much longer, because you will just be able to tap into your own body fat stores much more efficiently. And even in the example of eating dietary fat, then you can still get a significant amount of energy covered with your nutrition.
So that when we're doing fasting and we're getting rid of these, very dead cells, do we need to do a detox type of therapy as infrared therapy with that, and have some toxic binders help eliminate the dead garbage waste and help improve our bile flow and make sure we're pooping and getting rid of all those dead guys?
Well, generally, it would definitely help with that, so to say. So there are some situations where fasting may lead to some negative side effects or detox symptoms, which you can effectively avoid or mitigate with things like activated charcoal or milk thistle or some other type of binder or chelator. And basically, when it comes to some other strategies that you can add on top of that, then the adding some infrared or taking a sauna, exercising, and maybe drinking some apple cider vinegar, those things, they can all help with this process to a certain extent. Generally the autophagy process will happen regardless of you doing infrared sauna or not. It's going to just happen based upon the nutrient status of your body, so to say. So it's primarily regulated by how depleted you are from certain nutrients. And the most important nutrient for autophagy regulation are glucose and amino acids. So while you're fasting, you're not eating protein, which will lead to the activation of autophagy, and at the same time, you're not also eating, and eventually you'll also deplete your liver glycogen stores, which is another trigger for autophagy. So both the glucose and amino acids are quite, the important parts for autophagy.
So that kind of goes into two things. One, we should do fasting and keto in combination, perhaps, for enhancing this ability to get rid of our dead cells, and then work on our fat adaptation process. And then if we could talk kind of leading into what is AMPK, you talked a little bit about, and the mTOR, because you talk a lot about that in your book and good information on that.
Well, generally it would be easier to fast on a low-carb keto diet, because your body is somewhat more adapted to the kind of aspect of fat adaptation and using fat for fuel. So you would usually experience less hunger when you are doing fasting on a keto diet. And you would also experience the benefits of autophagy much faster, because you don't have a bunch of extra carbs floating in your system, and your glycogen stores are also semi-depleted already. So usually on a keto diet, you would have to fast less, and you would let's say you would have to fast less. You would have to fast shorter, in the sense that you would still have to, fast every once in a while, but the length of the fast would have to be shorter because you'll experience the benefits faster. And part of it has to do with, the depletion of liver glycogen. But like you mentioned, the activation of AMPK is also quite relevant. So AMPK is a fuel sensor that your body has that detects the kind of depletion of energy. So whenever your glucose stores become depleted, then AMPK starts to rise or gets activated, and this promotes ketosis. This promotes the conversion of, or it's going to promote the lipolysis, the burning of fatty acids, and it's also going to suppress insulin, so it makes you more insulin sensitive. And the opposite of that is mTOR, which is a mechanistic target of rapamycin, and this is the kind of growth switch instead of the fat burning switch. And mTOR gets raised by when you're eating, and especially when you're eating carbs and protein. So usually you can't really avoid the suppression of mTOR completely, even if you're eating like a very low carb keto diet. It's still going to be activated, and while you're in a fast state, the most effective way of suppressing mTOR is to just fast and spend more time in a fast state and eat less often. So that's where the switch occurs. You suppress mTOR during a fast state and you activate AMPK, because the two, they can't really coexist at the same time. Like you can't be in autophagy and you can't build muscle at the same time. So to say, your body is constantly deciding which state is going to be in based upon what kind of signals it receives from the environment and what kind of fuel storages your body has. So less energy and less energy production, or let's say energy storage, it's going to lead to higher autophagy and higher recycling.
But it's finding that right amount, right? So not too much fasting and not avoiding mTOR, because they're both beneficial, AMPK pathway and mTOR. And I think it seems like a lot of people get all or none. They just think, fasting, and jump on the bandwagon, and they don't do any strength training and enhance that other pathway and have, the balance between catabolic and anabolic, and everything is in homeostasis that we need to find, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So it seems like this is another thing in our body that is super smart, that we need to do both, but not too much one way or the other. So it's like finding that right balance between the two.
Yeah, exactly. Autophagy is good, and it's really important to have sufficient autophagy, but too much autophagy can be bad, and especially because it's going to lead to your muscle catabolism, and you're going to lose this vital tissue that you have, and you're also going to just feel more tired, and you don't have enough, vitality eventually. So that's why, you mentioned you have to cycle these things and balance them based upon what kind of situation you're at. So mTOR is also very beneficial because it promotes muscle growth, and it's even needed to grow all types of cells and hair and everything else. So if you're constantly in a state of catabolism and you're constantly in autophagy, then eventually you're gonna just break down. And chronic exercise is a good example of that as well. You need to recover from exercise in order to make those adaptations more permanent. So if you're constantly overtraining, you're undereating and throwing everything at yourself, then that's going to just lead to suboptimal performance, and you're just going to actually lose your gains.
So would fasting be good for people to do, athletes to do, when they're trying to recover, repair, and get rid of those dead cells?
To a certain extent, in some aspects, they can still do the idea of time restricted eating, which is what most people do when they think about intermittent fasting. If they're doing eating 1 meal a day or eating 2 meals a day, then they're actually doing what they're doing is time restricted eating, which is just the confinement of their daily eating window in a certain time frame. And that still has quite a lot of health benefits, and it's not going to interfere with their physical performance that much, as long as they're getting enough calories during the eating window, so to say. So as you become more fat adapted, as you become more used to fasting, then you're going to experience less of the negative side effects from the fasted state, so to say, and you'll be able to, get away with more fasting without hindering your performance or something like that. But if you're still like a high level athlete, or you're particularly trying to train for some competition, then it's always better to give your body more of the energy that it needs and do it more often, so to say, so that it wouldn't suffer some shortage or deprivation. So that's why it depends a lot on the goals of the particular individual, as well as the training load. Like most average people, they don't need to be eating like six meals a day or 5 meals a day. They can very safely just stick to 2 meals a day or 1 meal a day and still make progress in their training. So only like the very high intensity training individuals who do like maybe CrossFit or bodybuilding or some sort of that, or they're doing like professional sports, then for them, it's more important to be eating more frequently, because their body is under higher energy demands, and it's also more detrimental for them to suffer like lackluster performance. So most people, they can safely get away with like just eating 2 meals a day, 1 meal a day, or 3 meals a day, but they can still do it in like a confined time manner.
So we do, in my program, I've coached for years without really knowing it was OMAD and TRE and all this stuff, that it just ended up being, all right, well, if we stop eating before bed 2 to 3 hours, if we wait to eat till you're hungry, and then we started learning more about, the 16-hour time to do your intermittent fast, then you end up in that 8-hour window, and that ends up being your time restricted eating window. And when you're doing low carb, higher fat, it's so just automatic. I end up just eating 1 meal a day without being intentional. And I think once you teach people how to become fat adapted and go through that process, it's a no-brainer. You're not even thinking of food. You're just full and satisfied and don't have any cravings.
Yeah, exactly. Like the keto diet does make it very easy, and it definitely has like these mental clarity benefits because of the ketones, so to say, because a keto diet mimics the aspects of fasting a lot especially if you're combining it with some form of intermittent fasting, then you're basically never hungry, or if you are, then it's just like very short term, because your body just experiences mild sensation of discomfort for a moment, but then it's quickly like converts over into burning its own body fat, and that satiates you, and that gives you the energy that you need. So it's a very prime example of the mitochondria working properly, as well as the entire like metabolism is geared more towards like self-sufficiency and self-resourcefulness. So it's not really, it doesn't really make sense that you should have to be eating all the time, and especially the carbs and these gels, etc., because that's kind of a sign of the body isn't that flexible. It's not that metabolically flexible, and it's always dependent upon just one single fuel source, which is like very fleeting.
Mm-hmm. I hosted the first annual low carb athlete seminar at Ironman Hawaii this year, and we're going to try it again. We had 50 something people sign up, and we had maybe just 19 attended it, but it was with UCAN, Matt Bach, and Paul Larson, the prof. He talks a lot about HIIT science and low carb eating, and follows a lot what Dr. Noakes does with the Banting diet, with the green list of foods, and has people eat that. And I've done this for years and started thinking outside the box as an athlete. Why am I eating all this sugar, 500 calories an hour? I'm supposed to get through this drink mix and then have a gel or bar. And I started doing Ironmans back in 2001 and doing marathons and long distance cycling. And I was just talking about this yesterday, how I was trying to do what we're told, but then I was curious, why am I throwing up the whole bike ride, trying to shove all this stuff in my body? And then one day I was like, I have fat to lose. How am I supposed to burn the fat on my body when I'm eating all these calories? And it doesn't make any sense if people think about it. And I just still don't understand. That was, 2001. And I was starting to experiment with this and went to go for a bike ride without eating anything. And I, of course, bonked and had to have a nap on the side of the road and came back to life with a Cliff Bar. And now, I'm obviously fat adapted now, metabolically flexible. And it's just funny how so many people still don't understand that we're trained as endurance athletes to have all these carbs. And it just makes no sense to me why people, well, more and more now are starting to think about it. But it's just, it's interesting how the marketing campaigns out there win over common sense.
Yeah, that's for true. And like Robert Sykes, he's like a bodybuilder and he doesn't do like a bunch of endurance exercise. But I think last year earlier this year, he just ran a full marathon with no training in a fasted state. And that kind of shows the power of keto adaptation. And like once you've conditioned your body to burn fat for fuel, then there's no real hindrance to doing these sorts of things, especially endurance, because endurance activities already burn primarily fatty acids for fuel, even if you're like a sugar burner. And the body taps into glycogen and glucose only at a certain intensity, which is, for the average person tends to be around 65% of the VO2 max. But with keto adaptation, that threshold increases. And Jeff Volek and Stephen Finney, they've done a study where these adapted ultra endurance keto athletes, they can sustain the fat burning process even at intensities of like 90%, etc. So it comes to show that the body is very adaptable, and the more efficient you become at burning fat, then the easier it also gets.
Yeah, no, I used to do metabolic testing card on clients and myself back in 2005 with this company that got New Leaf testing, metabolic testing, but it got bought out by Lifetime Fitness about 5 years ago. So I had to stop. We couldn't use it anymore. But I have my old files and I could burn a high percentage of fat up to 164 heart rate and switch over to be anaerobic threshold about 172 heart rate. So I moved that metabolic crossover point way high with my training and how I trained and what I ate way back then in 2005 and training for Ironmans. So I know I love testing because you can visually see, are you doing the right food and training program? Is this helping your metabolic efficiency? And where's your crossover point? So it's great to do testing so you can actually visually see what's happening as they did in the FASTER study. I love doing it. It's exciting, and it's a great way for people to say, oh, you're totally training wrong and you're not burning any fat at all here. And people need to see that because you do the MAF type of training, max aerobic function heart rate for people, and they're running, especially running is hard to keep heart rate down, and people have to go so slow. I think they give up and don't understand that, all right, this time of year, especially off season, we want to train your body to become fat adapted, and it's how you train and how you eat and when you eat and how you eat. But the whole process of fat adaptation, keto adapted, how do you get people down that pathway? What's your philosophy? And before that, we should probably add in before and after, what is metabolic flexibility? Because I think that's important for athletes, especially if they're doing higher intensity.
Well, metabolic flexibility is just the ability to swap in between fuel sources and being very efficient and using both of the fuels, both the fat as well as glucose, so to say. So a regular person who hasn't ever done like a keto diet and they've never fasted before, then they're probably a pretty hard sugar burner, and that they're very adapted to only using glucose and carbohydrates for fuel. So that's why they experience the hunger cravings, and that's why they have to eat more frequently as well. But with things like keto and exercise and fasting, then you can you're promoting the aspect of fat adaptation. But the problem with that is also that, let's say, imagine if you're doing a strict keto diet all the time, then you're also just pushing the pedal on one fuel source, so to say. You're only burning fat, and that's the only thing that that your body knows how to do. And whenever you get off keto or you eat a bit of too many carbs, then you will just bonk because of that, because you're getting the keto flu again, etc. So that's not a good example of metabolic flexibility either. A good example of metabolic flexibility would be just to burn the glucose that you have and whenever you do run out of glucose, to immediately tap into the fat burning state and to start using the ketones and fatty acids for fuel very fast and efficiently with no like significant hindrances to it. So I don't know like any real examples of athletes, but maybe Zach Bitter is probably a good example of someone who is incorporating both carbs and fats for his training. He's primarily like a low carb athlete, but on some training periods he does eat a bit more carbs. So and that enables him to be tapping into the intensity aspect of carbs and glucose, while at the same time still being like a really good at fat burning and getting the benefits from that. So you can train metabolic flexibility by just initially, getting into ketosis and becoming fat adapted, because that's the critical part. Like metabolic flexibility without keto adaptation doesn't really exist, because you wouldn't be able to burn the fat, and you wouldn't be able to tap into your fat stores. So that's why, starting off with like maybe, usually I would say that everyone would benefit from a short period of doing a keto diet, just to build up these pathways and also change some of the body's liver enzymes and metabolic processes, so to say, to using fat. And after that, after they have become adapted to keto, then they can incorporate some form of a strategic carbohydrate refeeding, whether that be having some days where on some harder training days they would increase their carbohydrate intake from healthy carbs, or consume a bit of carbs around their heavier training, so to say, so that the carbs would be used for the training itself, and therefore they'll go back into ketosis afterwards. So I myself incorporate both of them in some aspects. Like I do eat like a low carb keto type of diet most of the time, but I'm not like really worried about how many carbs I'm eating. And on some heavier training days, I'll have like some healthier carbs, like some beetroot, sweet potatoes, squash, fruit, berries, those are the things. But they're always kind of planned and timed around my workouts and heavier exercise periods.
And I think that's a great point that, we tend to train longer on the weekends, and you might have a different schedule of life and work on the weekends. So I think automatically I was doing that, doing my fasting during the week, and I tend to do a 24-hour fast on Wednesdays just because my schedule, I don't eat till I get home. So it's 4:00 on Wednesdays. And then weekends, automatically I'm eating more, like 2 meals, and adding a little more carbs, because I find I'll eat, I don't need them, but it's just, I think the whole question is, do you need carbs? And is it just because you want to not be so strict that, like these keto carnivore friends of mine, that I think it's so boring, and it's just how not to be. I dieted way too much growing up, I think, when I was in high school and college, that I don't like to be so strict, because then I feel like it's a diet, and then you don't. I mean, it's not that I'm eating crap, or, I'm still eating good real foods, like you're saying, sweet potatoes, and having some berries. And I think it's a fine line of when you get to be so strict and it's not sustainable, and you're just creating more of a eating disorder or, food addiction in a different way, and having it become this diet, rather than I want to teach people, here's a fat adaptation process. Here, stick with this program for 6 weeks until. What we'll talk about next is, how do you know you're fat adapted? Once you kind of know you're there and you have that metabolic flexibility, then, have that, what you call, everyone calls a cyclical keto diet, and kind of mix it up a little bit on the weekends, because then I think it's more sustainable. But you have to be metabolically flexible first, right? Before you start adding in that I'm not as strict on Saturdays, and have not a cheap, crappy meal, but maybe you're having a little more carbs. But timing, as you're saying, like we go for a 3-hour bike ride or going for a longer run on Sundays. And so we can do that without damaging our fat adaptation process and our health, right?
Yeah. Like for like survival, you can definitely survive without ever eating carbs. But but I think it's pretty clear that carbs do have like a performance benefit, and especially like in higher intensity, so to say. And it depends on what your goals. If you don't train that often, or if you don't train that hard, then you can get away with not having the carbs either, and you'll just become very adapted to keto. But at the same time, it's also like if you're just eating keto or carnivore for that matter, then you're kind of pushing yourself into a corner, and you're becoming less flexible with your metabolism. That's kind of inevitable. Like if you are, if you're eating like a very clean paleo diet with no grains, no gluten, and then you accidentally have like a piece of bread on one day, then you're gonna get like a severe, maybe like an autoimmune response, but you'll definitely feel like awful the next day because your body isn't used to metabolizing that. So that's like a not really ideal position that I would want to be in, so to say. That although I don't really crave bread, or I don't eat cake on a regular basis, it's still that I want to enable my body to have the possibility and ability to burn it and metabolize it efficiently, so to say. I don't want to become insulin resistant because of avoiding carbs all the time, so to say. And at the same time, I don't want to become insulin resistant because of eating too many carbs. So that's why the cycling aspect is a very, it's definitely more sustainable. And it's actually, I would say it would be like a more flexible, as well as more like your higher performance would be also because of that, because you'll just get the best of both worlds.
Well, I've told our listeners know that I became insulin resistant, even though I was doing low carb, high fat, and exercising at the right heart rates and intervals, because of insulin resistance came from chronic stress. So, I'm trying to teach people, becoming more of a health coach, and I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, and just becoming a FDN practitioner where I can order functional labs and correlate all this information to help people. Because even if you're doing keto and doing fasting, I still find a lot of people are eating foods that they're reactive to. So doing a food sensitivity lab is essential. We do a gut permeable gut wall lining, a leaky gut test, and stool antigen test to find out parasites and bacteria. And we do, of course, hormone balance, HPA axis function, and your main hormones. And it's just putting that all together with a fasting and keto diet is what I'm doing with my clients. And I think it's great to see. We also do a test that measures your oxidative stress and your liver congestion and your ability to break down proteins. There's so much of the health parts that I think a lot of people are missing out. Yes, if you fast and do intermittent fasting, you can improve the function of your liver and digestive system by getting rid of the crap and giving it a little vacation time and getting that internal housekeeping happening, working on getting your sleep so your body can heal and recover while you're sleeping, and all the hormetic stresses we talk about. But the digestive process is essential in eating in a parasympathetic state. All these other lifestyle factors, I think people need to. My goal is to educate them more on my show and try to help more people that side of it. So it's just the fasting is so essential, time restricted eating, and the keto low carb. But do you find, getting to my question is, do you think people need some supplementation, have some HCl digestive enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics? What's your kind of take on that side of it?
Well, there are some things that would help the transition process to be easier. So usually people tend to not produce enough like bile to break down fats, and they tend to like suffer from loose stool, or they'll just lack the energy because their body isn't able to burn the fat that efficiently. So using some maybe digestive enzymes can be a good idea, or ox bile and milk thistle, for example. Those things are pretty regular, even for me, who has already become like a fat adapted person, so to say. I still prefer to use them because it's pretty convenient. Not all the time, but every once in a while.
You were using Capex, weren't you too? Did you try that?
Yeah, from Biooptimizers. The Capex. It's a pretty good product, and it's not only for the improvement digestion, but also just the energy production, so to say. Because it includes like all mitochondrial and enhancers and other compounds that promote the energy production. But also, even like caffeine is also like promotes ketosis as well as autophagy. So that's another example of like a performance, like one of the best performance enhancing supplements, a cup of coffee. So that's what I tend to use.
Not more is not better though.
Yeah.
Right? Because I used to do the bulletproof fat coffee, which I just tried doing this last week, and I could see how I got addicted to it. But it's so easy to just think, oh, because people say coffee's okay, have a cup of coffee,
Right.
but 2 cups and do it before 11 in the morning, not drink coffee till 2 in the afternoon, and you're like jacked up, killing your body too much.
Yeah.
Everyone you say, oh, coffee or fasting's good. And then everyone always does everything to the extreme. I think the type A people that do all this stuff want to go, oh, more is better. If I do longer fast and do it every month, is that better for me? And I think same with the exercise and everything. We've got overachievers.
That's true.
So with your fat adaptation, keto adaptation process, how do people know if they are in ketosis or if they're fat adapted?
I like to think that being in ketosis and being keto adapted, they're not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
So you can definitely be in ketosis and produce a lot of ketones in your blood, but it doesn't mean that you're actually using them for energy, and it doesn't mean that you're like fully keto adapted. The keto adaptation process is more like a matter of degree, so you can't really measure it. You can only kind of guesstimate it based upon your like performance and well-being. So usually some aspect of or some elevation of ketones indicates like leaning towards keto adaptation, but you can just do that by fasting for 24 hours after having eaten like a bunch of carbs. So you'll have like a few ketones in your blood, but it doesn't mean that you're like keto adapted because you still feel like tired and garbage. So the best kind of guesstimate for keto adaptation is to look at how you feel in a fasted state without having like eaten anything, and preferably like if you're able to just feel fine and don't have like any hyperglycemia, or you don't have like brain fog or fatigue after having fasted for, let's say, 20 to 24 hours, then that's a pretty good sign that you are in ketosis. And at the same time, you're also able to use those ketones for energy, so to say. So your body is tapping into its own body fat instead of getting hungry.
Yeah, it's funny. So if you think you measure, say we use Keto Mojo and your glucose is around 80 to 90 and you're showing ketones 0.5 to 3.0, is that you're saying that you're in ketosis there? Or are you saying you're not necessarily keto adapted, but you're showing ketones? But how does that work if you're not?
Yeah, the general kind of agreement is that the nutritional ketosis begins at 0.5 and the optimal kind of upper limit is around 3.5 or such. But like usually I would say that even like 3.0 is already a good sign of actually moving towards that. But I've also seen that a lot of people who have been doing keto for like a longer period of time, then their ketones tend to decrease a little bit. So they're not getting like 3.0 millimoles anymore. They're getting more like just 1 or 0.7 or somewhere around that. So less ketones doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong or that more ketones is always better. Like it can actually be the opposite, so to say. So usually your body just settles down to a certain range, which depends a lot on like the individual, how much fat are they eating, how much exercise they're doing, etc., and how long I've been doing the keto diet. But usually you can kind of predict that if you are, let's say, fat adapted, then your ketone should be somewhere around like 0.5, up to 2.0 or 2.5.
A lot of people, the athletes, we were talking about that a while ago. If you're exercising and your ketones or blood sugar is higher and the ketones are lower, then you think you kind of like, oh, I shouldn't exercise, or people think they're doing something wrong, but really it's a normal response.
Yeah, exactly. So I can even like eat a bunch of carbs tonight, which kicks me out of ketosis, and I'll have 0 ketones tomorrow, but it doesn't mean that I've lost my keto adaptation, because I'll still feel fine. Like I don't feel like lack of energy or something, because my body is like more flexible, so to say. Although I'll be kicked out of ketosis for like a day, I'll return back into it within the second day or something. And if I even like combine it with exercise, then that process can be actually much faster.
So you tend to do the cyclical keto yourself? You explain in your book all the different keto versus targeted versus standard and carb backloading. People can read more about it in the book.
Yeah, usually I do. Yeah, the cyclical with maybe having some carbs once a week, but sometimes I may also do like a targeted keto diet, which is I'll consume like some fast digestible carbs during a workout, like maybe like a banana or something. But I actually prefer to take like something like D-ribose, which is like a low glycemic carbohydrate, and it's not going to spike your insulin that high. You still get like the performance boost and the mitochondrial boost, but it's not like kicking you out of ketosis completely.
Yeah, I have some of that. I was taking it in the summer. So with supplementation, what type of supplements do you like doing to enhance your recovery, repair, performance, longevity, working on mitochondria? What are your favorites?
Yeah, well, I do take some digestive enzymes because they're not only for digestion, but they're also like anti-aging and longevity. And
but do you take them without food? Because I've learned that if you take your digestive enzymes without food, they're good for inflammation, but with food, they act as enzymes to break down your food.
Yeah. Like they work both ways. So to say that if you take them with food, then they'll break down the nutrients and help with digestion. But if you take them in a fasted state or an empty stomach, then they'll just start to clear the food particles and the nutrients in your body. So that can like accelerate the benefits of autophagy or fasting. And in addition to that, I also take creatine, which is another like a performance enhancing supplement, but it also has many longevity boosting benefits. And so I'll also take I take some collagen and the glycine, which are good for the joints and well as just managing inflammation and improving general like sleep as well. Glycine is awesome for sleep. I'll take that in the evening usually. And maybe I also started experimenting with some NAD recently, but we'll see about that. It's so far it's been pretty interesting, and I do notice like a small difference. But yeah, those are kind of main supplements that I'll take on a regular basis, like some digestive enzymes, glycine, collagen, creatine, and maybe things like some B vitamins or something as an NAD precursor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. I've been taking True Niagen a couple of years, and I'm just going to start testing out MitoQ. And the thing is, you have to know if it works or not. You have to stop taking everything else, and then titrate, sequence it right, so you just can test out if it's doing something. But they say it takes 2 to 3 months to feel different sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to get to the last 10 minutes here. The Metabolic Autophagy program. Let's finish up with that. And you have a great metabolic autophagy flow chart and explain all the different options depending what type of exercise you do. You have so much information in that huge book that is, how many pages is in it? 500 something?
Something like that. Upper limit of 500.
So it's a great resource. As I said, I keep going back to it again, and so much good information combined. So the Metabolic Autophagy program, talk about how that process works and anything you want to share on how it helps for endurance athletes.
Yeah, the Metabolic Autophagy, let's say, principles of the program, they kind of help you to combine intermittent fasting with primarily resistance training and muscle growth, so to say. So, like I said, both of them are quite important for longevity. And you don't really want to, you don't want to have deficient autophagy, but you don't want to have deficient muscle mass and deficient strength either, because they're also like quite associated with increased longevity and increased health span, especially. So that's why, when people do fasting or they do exercise, then they tend to ignore one or the other. So they're either fast all the time and do a bunch of exercise, but they'll never like do the important exercise like resistance training and muscle growth that maintains lean muscle mass and improves their metabolic flexibility and that sort of thing. So that's why the book as well as the program combine these things together and teach you the principles of how do you structure them in a balanced way into your life. And the program especially, it includes a lot of the content in the book, but the unique aspect of it comes from the addition of like a meal plan for 4 weeks and a 4-week workout routine as well, which is primarily focused on resistance training and muscle growth. It does include like some cardiovascular conditioning, but it's not like a primarily endurance program. It's more like for a person who is wanting to be fully functional and fully like improve their body composition with resistance training and muscle growth, and like a bunch of recipes for both keto, for both carbs, and how do you combine them together for like the best health outcomes.
So have you experimented doing more the carnivore style, as all these guys are into it now? Keto carnivore, or like my friend Danny Vega's Mr. Strict Keto, or not keto, but carnivore. How have you done with that?
I haven't done like a full carnivore, experiment, but I can see like the application for some people. So it can be definitely very useful as a short-term elimination diet, and almost like a cleanse in the sense to see how do you react to the different foods. So most people may unawareingly be suffering from some autoimmune conditions, for instance, like against dairy, against gluten, or against lectins, beans, whatever it may be. So going through this short period can be a good way to mitigate the negative side effects and identify them. But in the long run, again, like I myself wouldn't want to, push myself into that kind of corner. I can see the application of maybe doing it in a cyclical manner of, you eat pure carnivore for some days, but then if you keep the plants and vegetables in your diet, then you'll be also maintain the ability to tolerate them and metabolize them better. So yeah, like if you avoid all plants, then you will probably eventually have like it's going to be harder for you to start eating them again, so to say. And most people, if they want to do like a strict carnivore, then they can go ahead. But I wouldn't say that it's like better than a diet that is already primarily, incorporates both some meats and vegetables, so to say. So an omnivore diet is definitely more medically flexible, and it probably is better for performance. And it's also like better for, it's more sustainable, I think, in the long run.
Yeah, it's funny. You hear both sides, right? Because everyone's talking about this movie out on Netflix or whatever it is on, being vegan. And then people listen to that like, oh, I shouldn't eat meat. And then you listen to the keto carnivore camp and then it's like, oh my gosh, it totally makes sense. So it just is so example that everyone's unique by individual, N equals 1. And we all have our own genetics and gut biome and digestive issues and food sensitivities that you need to look at what works for you as an individual and, listen to everything, but be open-minded and experiment as you do. And I do, and listen to your body and have more intuitive nutrition and exercise training as well. Because I think, you can listen to all this and it's just everyone has different opinions. And I think it makes sense, but then you have to take in, what works for you.
Yeah, that's true. Like, everyone has the different metabolism and definitely different, conditions in their life. So I wouldn't put like a sedentary housewife on a high carb diet because they're not really using those carbs. Whereas I would maybe put a high level athlete on it for a short period of time, but I would eventually still want to incorporate, some aspect of keto adaptation, because that's like the aboriginal state for most people, or the human body, because we are primarily like fat burners, or we do very well with it. And it's definitely like healthier as well in terms of managing your blood sugar, in terms of managing insulin, and like just energy levels will be more optimal in my experience.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the whole plant paradox, even though his food plan's different went. I think he
Right. Well, you can prepare the plants in a way that lowers the amount of antinutrients in them, and you can definitely. There is definitely truth to it. Like especially in the example of oxalates, if you avoid your microbiome determines how well you tolerate the oxalates or how well you metabolize them, and if you avoid them altogether, then you're gonna reduce the amount of oxalate digesting bacteria in your gut, if that makes sense. So if you have them at least in some, definitely don't overdo the oxalates. Don't do like these massive spinach bowls, but having a bit of vegetables in your diet, I think that's not a problem for most people, unless they deliberately or in this hypochondriac manner start to look for things or start to identify symptoms that they don't actually have, and that's where that's where they may potentially manifest these symptoms because they overthink it and they become very, very neurotic about it.
I know I've found after years of just being a salad queen and just eating mostly vegetables, barely any meat, how much better I feel when I finally started eating red meat, steak, and grass-fed beef. And it's just like, wow, I feel so much better inside. I kind of just been trying it out myself, but I feel so much better, me as an individual, not having salads and all the vegetables. It's kind of funny because my whole entire life been all vegetables and salads are my favorite meals and snacks. And now it's like, all right, switching it totally backwards other way. But you have to experiment, find out, oh my gosh, my energy, my workouts, my sleep, everything's so much better. In my belly, I realized cucumbers. I was eating a ton of cucumbers and the seeds and things and tomatoes. They just, you don't think, oh, they're healthy food, we should eat them. But then sometimes you realize, oh, I don't even feel good after I eat them and my stomach's bloated or whatever. You might have these health issues. You don't realize it coming from those healthy vegetables.
Right. Yeah. Well, you can definitely overdo anything, and especially I think usually these people who react negatively to these vegetables and plants happens because they overdo it, so to say, that they either go on a diet, and when you are on a diet, then this cucumber has so little calories, or this celery has so little calories, but it still has some of these mild antinutrients. And, if you're just eating cucumbers, then you will run into some troubles. But if you have one slice or a few slices of cucumbers in your salad, I think that's not the problem.
Yeah. Goldilocks effect, not too much, not too little, just the right amount that makes you feel good.
Right, exactly.
So thank you for your time. I know I thought I'd just go 45 minutes, but I could talk 2 hours with you. So we have all these questions. I'll put what we were going through on the show notes and your links, and anything else you want to share, any things coming up for you, the new projects you're working on?
At the moment, no. I have an upcoming sleep book, but the Metabolic Autophagy book is already pretty detailed for people to delve into first.
Yeah, and the sleep book's your next project. Then that's out next year.
Yeah.
Good. Everyone needs more sleep for sure. So thanks so much. And I'll put all the links for people who can find your podcast and YouTube channel and all the ebooks you've put together. So I thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you can go enjoy your weekend now.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, and it was a good chat.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.